Hey there YouTube. So today I want to go ahead and talk with you guys about the 2015 to 2019 Subaru Outback. In front of me I've got a 2017 Subaru Outback. This is the premium sort of midline edition with the 2.5 liter horizontally opposed 4-cylinder engine mated to a continuously variable transmission. Today I want to talk with you guys about some common complaints you will notice in this particular generation, as there are some that are pretty prevalent, but there are others that are kind of dependent on your driving habits. And so we'll talk about some things that I have ultimately seen, as well as some things that maybe others have seen in the course of them purchasing this vehicle. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing you will actually notice on this vehicle is the gas and the brake pedal tend to be a little too sensitive or not sensitive enough. This mostly is concerning the brake pedal, as it does feel rather spongy as you try to stop, and sometimes it seems like you need a lot more pressure than what's required to actually slow down the car. So what you end up doing is you actually end up braking a little bit too hard at some points, which ultimately causes an abrupt stop per se. The other thing you will notice is that sometimes the gas pedal, it tends to be very overly sensitive, especially when coming off of a turn or resuming acceleration. Granted, that could be transmission programming, however, it's not necessarily certain as to why. Me personally, I've only done it about once. I came off of a right turn and kind of spun the tires a little bit, which is rather hard to do in a Subaru, so I was pretty proud of myself. But if you are a little bit of a harder driver, for example, my fiance is a little bit of a harder driver than myself, he has no issues operating this vehicle at all, and so it kind of is one of those things where your driving habits really depend on this actually being exacerbated. So if you are a little bit of a harder driver, you won't notice this as much, but those of us who are very it's not a light foot, we definitely notice this a little bit more. So the next thing you're going to notice is the suspension on this can be a little too soft, and this is mostly in terms of evasive maneuvers, such as trying to avoid hitting somebody in front of you, or also trying to swerve into the next lane, or even cornering. This vehicle made its way into the SUV segment in 2010, and a lot of things had to be softened from that Baja Swagger Wagon, from the Baja or the Outback Swagger Wagon. Those suspensions were a little bit harsher, and these ones are definitely a lot softer and a little bit quieter. But the thing about it is they're a little too floaty at times. Granted, they drive very smoothly, but the problem with it is that it does tend to actually lean a little too much. For example, going into a corner, the car will definitely have a lot of body roll if you turn in quickly, or if you are stomping on the brakes, your front end kind of goes down into the Earth's core. So basically, if they were to sort of keep the suspension from rolling so much, it definitely would be a little bit more enjoyable in terms of being a sporty feel. But overall, it actually drives really nicely. It's very smooth, it's very linear, and ultimately it just, when you're going in a straight line or just driving normally without any evasive maneuvers, the suspension is great. This thing has actually been a gem. The next thing you will notice is the all-wheel drive system. This is for those of you guys who go off-roading. A lot of you guys may notice that it will send power to the wrong wheel, and this has actually been a common issue with Subaru for quite a while. So this isn't due to the CVT, this is actually due to just programming. But at times people have noticed that the all-wheel drive system will send power to the wrong wheel, mostly when the wheel is up in the air. So that's why I'm saying for those of you guys going off-roading, because for those of us who just use these for daily drivers, basically we have all four wheels on the ground anyway, so we don't necessarily have this issue. The next thing you will notice is actually the engine. The engine on this one is a 2.5 liter horizontally opposed 4-cylinder, so yes, it's still the boxer engine that's been used for quite an extensive period of time. But with this engine, there have been some complaints with oil consumption. The head gasket issue it has been resolved mostly. Granted, there are still some cases out there. But what you hear more nowadays is actually the engine is consuming a quart or two of oil per maybe 1,000 to 2,000 miles. So what ends up happening is that you go to the dealership, they yell at you because you're low on oil, and then after that, the engine blows up, and then they make you pay for it because there's a record that you were low on oil, even though you specifically told them, hey, my car is consuming a lot of oil, can you guys look at it? It's still under warranty. This has been a common practice of every dealership that I've been in contact with. They won't fix the issue, they'll say they can't replicate it. And then ultimately afterwards, when things actually break, then they're like, oh, well, we had a record of it. I'm like, well, yeah, stupid. Like, I've literally been trying to tell you to not void my warranty. So luckily, in this vehicle, we have not experienced that problem. It goes in full, it comes out full. That sounded very dirty, and for those of you guys who have a dirty mind, good for you, keep it up. But basically the oil has never been consumed per se in this particular engine, so it actually is not a normal feature of these vehicles to consume a large amount between changes. So if that's the case, you need to talk to your dealership if it's doing that, because this is not a normal function. And if they say it's normal, they're just basically trying not to put a new engine in your vehicle. So this one has not consumed oil between changes, and it's been an absolute gem. Moving into the last complaint, actually there's two or three more, so please forgive me on that one. Moving into the next complaint, we're going to talk about the transmission. This actually is going to intertwine because there's two complaints about it that I want to address. For one, it's most commonly slow, and the reason being is that it is a continuously variable transmission, so you run into the issue of the rubber band effect. Now granted, Subaru did improve this continuously variable transmission in 2015 and added those shift points. Still isn't enough to get it to eliminate the rubber band effect completely. So a lot of people have had the issue where they would stomp on the gas and it would take a second to catch up, and then once it did, the engine would kind of surge and you get that power. But the thing about it is that it's just not enough. The CVT just makes the engine feel gutless. It really does slow it down. Granted, it adds to the fuel economy, which is amazing because the fuel economy on this one is way better than my Tucson over there, which has a 6-speed auto. So the CVT, obviously, it's doing its purpose, but it's not but until you get into those higher speeds, the engine will not be in its power band. So even though it does fake those shift patterns, it needs a little bit more in terms of elimination. I think Subaru should kind of go with the idea of adding a launch gear to ultimately improve the acceleration, because the Toyota Corollas nowadays are way faster with that launch gear, and it makes it for a much more enjoyable driving experience. So with that, the next complaint on the CVT is we're gonna have to actually enter the vehicle for this one. Unfortunately, guys, COVID-19 has struck the world and we cannot go into car washes, so you will have to forgive me. I did not wash this before this review, but we're going to go ahead and talk about a very common complaint with these CVT transmissions, and what that is actually the engagement. A lot of times people have had 1 to 2 second delays when actually putting the transmission into drive. So I'm gonna actually demonstrate that that is a normal feature. Again, please excuse the dust. It is a black interior and it hasn't been run in a couple days. So here we go. So the car is currently in park. However, when I go down into drive, I get a rather lengthy delay between park and drive. So it is about 1 to 2 seconds. And this is actually a normal feature that Subarus have. Back in park, we'll go into reverse. A little bit of a faster engagement, but let's go back into drive. Little bit faster there. So basically the transmission does have a delay going from park to drive. It is a common feature on Subaru CVTs, as everyone that I have driven has had the same problem. So for those of you guys who are experiencing this, maybe a little bit worse, just keep an eye out on your CVT, but basically you wouldn't have to worry too much about it failing. Subarus are a little bit more reliable than Nissans in terms of their CVTs. They use a chain instead of a steel belt, so ultimately it takes a little bit longer to stretch out. But again, you got to be careful. CVTs are not exactly the strongest and they're pretty fragile transmissions. So the last complaint, and this is the last one, is the infotainment system. This car is actually on its second one. They were going to replace it, I think, again, but then they never actually replaced it. So this is the second one. In the 2015 to 2017 models, their infotainment systems had a lot of issues with freezing screens, and when you would make phone calls, it would call the wrong person. And unfortunately on this one, it still hasn't been resolved. So it will tend to call the first person on the list instead of actually calling the person that you need to get a hold of. So essentially the infotainment system was updated for 2018, and the issues, according to the dealership that we go to, have been mildly resolved, but still there are some complaints with it. So ultimately, hopefully the 2020 tablet looking thing is a winner, because these infotainment systems have been a little problematic, and we've actually experienced that as well. So with that, folks, I hope you guys enjoyed. Please excuse the mess, but again, car washes are not open, so we're kind of just gonna have to go from there. But if you guys do have any questions, by all means, leave them in the comments section. This has been an amazing vehicle for us. My Tucson's been great too, but this is ultimately kind of still the winner. The Tucson, if they would actually better with the gas mileage and such, it would definitely be a winner as well. Overall though, the Tucson's been way more reliable than the Elantra, so I'm not going to complain, and that car is the next one going on a road trip, so we'll kind of just go from there. So yeah guys, this is the Subaru Outback 2017. This is, I believe, the premium edition. This is the midline trim. This isn't the one that's fully loaded, but it's got a lot of features in it and things that you'll love. I just wish there was a shift boot there, because this is obviously with the dust and stuff like that that gets through, it actually can get into the shift column. And actually that happened once already and we had to get it replaced. Lord knows what spilled in there, but it does happen. So yeah, and then my fiance with his flamingo cup holders. So that's about it, folks. Thanks for watching, and I hope you guys have a good one. And please like and subscribe. Thanks.